Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ariel and we're really excited to have you here for the Invoicing Upgrade webinar on best practices. This has been a huge project for our team. We've been working so hard and so long to get this to you. And we're really excited to have you here today with our CEO, Jeff. He's gonna walk you through some best practices for how to make the most of the invoicing upgrade, since all of you have different businesses with different processes and you're gonna wanna use this upgrade in different ways. So without further ado, here's Jeff.
Thanks, Ariel. Yeah, thanks. That's a great introduction, and it really does set the stage for, you know, where this module's at. It's really about that sharp end of getting all of your billing done and making things work for your business. But because, frankly, you guys are all over the world in all sorts of different industries, billing in all sorts of different ways, whether it's, you know, milestone billing on projects or time and materials on things that you've done in the past month, or retainer billing, or for most of you, actually a combination of the above. Getting the new invoicing module set up and really dialed in for your businesses is an exciting opportunity and something we want to spend a little bit more time on than just pointing you at help documents and sending you on your way. So that's what we're going to cover today. This is going to be one of our sort of longer webinars, but we're going to take the time to dive into these areas and explain how they fit together, not just point at screens, so that you feel really confident and in control of how to make the invoicing module in Accelo really sing for your business. So in terms of our agenda, we're going to cover a few things today. The first thing we're going to cover is, the first couple of things actually, are going to be a bit plumbing orientated. This is going to be about setting up the, you know, sort of admin type side of things, where we talk about our new price list, also known as materials and services items. We're going to talk about how they connect to things that you're probably already familiar with or need to know about from an accounting point of view. This isn't hardcore accounting. This is just the stuff that you already do, and you know, with your invoicing. And then we're going to talk about how we bring those, you know, sort of price list or service and material items together into your budget processes, so you can you know, use them confidently with projects, quotes, project plans, I should have said, tickets, retainers, and even, you know, project templates. After that, we're going to move into what's one of the more exciting parts of the configuration experience, or the power in your disposal, which is the invoice templates. I'm going to cover how they work in a bit more detail. And then we're actually going to go through and we're going to create some invoices for projects, tickets, retainers, and then finish up with running through how the new billing your clients in bulk with the new client billing wizard works. So that's what we're going to cover today. All right, so the first thing I wanted to go through is this new, you know, what we call internally a material and services list, but you can think of kind of as your price list of your various products or your product list. Now, this is something our users have been asking for quite a long time, and it makes sense. You know, being able to have a reusable list of things that you sell is really desirable. It makes quoting faster and easier. It makes project planning and budgeting, putting together budgets for the work you're going to do a whole lot easier. And so we're really excited that this is part of the new upgrade, and it's been in everyone's accounts since the weekend's upgrade, but I want to spend some more time on how it works and fits together. Now, the services and materials, as we call it, you can actually rename those materials to be called products. The reason we call them materials is, you know, there's lots of different ways to describe things, but a lot of people think in terms of time and materials. So we wanted to sort of follow that to an extent. But yeah, basically you can rename that module to be whatever you like. These modules, or these, sorry, service and material items, are able to be created directly through Accelo, which is pretty awesome. And you're also able to import a list of them from a CSV file if you like. So if you get a price list from a vendor, you can slurp all that information in and have it come straight into Accelo without having to do the data entry. Another key part is that with the Xero, QuickBooks, and Sasu integrations, we actually import from the inventory list in those products to slurp that information in and be able to provide that data straight in and connected to all of the right ledger and account codes. And we'll also talk about the way that the ledger and account codes fit together. So let's have a look at the material list here. So this is available under the configuration area. So you can click on the menu and then configuration. And then you come in and you're able to see your materials and services list. which contains a list of the materials and a list of the services. The difference between the two is the services are the things that your team are billing hours or putting time against, whereas materials aren't connected to time. They're things that are, sold and often bought by the organization and on-sold. And so here's an example of just some simple stuff like, a common content management system called Contigo. I've also got some examples of some hardware like computers and keyboards and mice. This is just for the purposes of our demo today. You can obviously have whatever you like in there, and there's really no upper bound or limits on how many of these that you have, because all the interfaces that we use for you to actually put these things to work use our magical search functionality. So you can have a list that's got 30,000 items, and that's fine. We'll just search against those. So let's have a look at a particular material here. So we can look at something like the, let's say the enterprise version of this content management system. Here you're able to go through and edit things like the title, the code that you use, provide a description for what that material is. And then you can also designate your revenue price, or what you earn as income. Your cost price is in what it costs you to buy that item in if you do buy it from somewhere else. And then you've also got your account codes and tax codes. So these are pieces of information that are then used to send across to your accounting system. And as you can see, these entries here make it nice and easy for you to set that sort of stuff up. The services list is a little bit different. Instead of having the buy and sell prices, services are designed to be more like a bucket of the things that you can do. So we can go in and look, for example, at an example service here. So we can see that we've got design services that we sell in exports, so we don't have any tax on them, but other services, maybe we do have tax, or if you work across state lines and need to charge sales tax at different levels, you can have multiple services in here. The actual pricing of services, so the number of hours, the rate per hour, all of those details, is something that actually gets set down in the project templates or in the other templating areas, like milestone templates and quotes. And the reason for that is a particular service that you have for one client might be charged, at 30 hours, and another one might be charged at 10 hours, depending on the scope of the works. So there's a lot more variability and fluidity in services. Whereas the work that goes on in materials, it's you can't really sell half a MacBook, and you end up more with a quantity question there. All right, so that's the services and materials list. And I wanted to show you here, we're going to put this up as a link on our blog. This is an example of the file format if you wanted to import these guys in a CSV. So you'd be able to go through and choose your code and title and description, costs and price that you sell them for, as well as your account code and your tax code. And we're able to pull those details in a CSV file. This has just got a few records in it. You might even recognize some of the titles from what we've got here. But you can basically go through and see those details and have your own format that you use, or own source, if you like, that you can then run through the import wizard. All right, so let's move along to the next slide, and we'll talk about how this stuff fits together. So each product, and I've got them represented in the little chart on the right here in blue, each product or material item and each service item is able to be tied back to an account ledger. That's the guys here in the yellowy orangey color. And those account ledgers, if any of you are familiar with what you've got in your accounting, whether it be Xero, Sasu, QuickBooks, those are what's often known as entries in a chart of accounts. So they're like the income items that when you produce your income statement or your profit and loss, you can group them and see how much revenue in a certain period you've generated based on these certain accounts or account ledger codes. Now, with your accounting products, you probably don't want to have an individual ledger code for every type of printer or keyboard or software license that you sell. You probably want to group them together in categories, because otherwise your chart of accounts is going to be ridiculously long. And so the idea is that you're able to use these product and service materials and have lots and lots of them, and have those map back multiple material or service items going into individual ledger or account codes. And so I've just given you an example here how a theoretical hardware sales category would contain printers and keyboards. And obviously I've just got one printer material here and one keyboard material. In reality, if that's the sort of thing you're selling, you're probably going to have a couple of hundred different types of printers and a couple of dozen types of keyboards. Similarly with the licenses, you might have different tiers of product license that you sell or on sell. And then from a I guess a services perspective, you can have lots of different types of services there. So again, just for we're dealing with a slide deck here, so we don't have a huge amount of real estate, but you're gonna, we've got 5 of them listed here: consulting, workshop, training, etc. Those guys, you can, kind of go to town with them, have lots and lots of different versions. Now, in addition to these being linked to various account ledgers, and I should also say that these account ledger links are very much defaults. And when you create an invoice, if you need to, you can override them. So if you've got a special situation where you created the project and it turns out the customer's getting billed offshore and you need to have the tax-free version, you can change that. But the idea is that you have these defaults in place here for both the ledger codes and the tax codes, so that your team who are going through and creating quotes, might be your salespeople, or your project managers who are creating project plans, or maybe the quote got converted on one and automatically created the project for you. So your project managers don't have to know about this stuff. But the idea is that the folks who are doing the creation and the invoicing work don't have to be financial controllers or bookkeepers or accountants. Fundamentally, they don't really need to know any of the stuff about account ledgers that live in your accounting system, or tax codes that then become part of how you do your reporting to whichever tax jurisdiction you're in. The point is, people can just choose from the product and service items that make sense to them and that are labeled deliberately, and everything will take care of itself. Those ledger codes and tax codes become obfuscated. They become part of the background. And where we'll get to when we talk about the templates is those will actually become something you can automate, so that you can even do billing. Where we want to get to is you can actually do billing from our mobile apps. So you're actually able to say, hey, project is moved into stage X, and then the progressions automatically kick in to bill the remaining budget of that project, for example. Really love the idea of you being able to bill for your work from the beach. So that's this background. Sorry if it's a lot of information. I'm sort of trying to go into this in enough detail that if you need to, you can kind of rewatch this and understand it. But the objective is, you do this kind of setup stuff once, and if you're pulling this in from your accounting software like Xero or QuickBooks, this will all automatically come in. We slurp this information across, so there's nothing you need to know. But if you pull this gear in, then we'll be able to, you'll be able to be off and running with it on an ongoing basis. Okay, so let's talk about, we talked about the items and how they fit together. Now let's talk about how we'd actually go about using them. So let's go in here, and I'm just going to change up. I'm going to go and look at a project. This is a test project we've been playing with, the good old example project. So let me pull this out here. And we can see with the example project, as it loads up, that we can come in and edit this project plan. Now, the project plan interface is the same for quotes, it's the same for project templates, and it's the same for milestone templates. I'm just going to show it to you in a project mode here, but it's consistent across all of those different places. So we've just got an example project here that's got requirements analysis, creative implementation, and training. It's designed to be fairly generic for the purpose of this demo. But basically, there's a few phases here. Requirements analysis tends to be more of that consulting work. Creative tends to be more of the design work. Implementation tends to be more of the coding or development work. And then training is a different line as well. So coming in here, let's look at what we've got for requirements analysis. So if we go across to our budget tab, if you haven't looked at this since the upgrade on the weekend, this will all be new information to you. And we've redesigned this interface, this tab here, to be a heck of a lot more user-friendly. So what you're able to do, first of all, kind of doing the left to right thing, there's a whole row for services at the top. So this is the services block. And then down the bottom here is materials, if you've got some. And so with the services block, first of all, you say, hey, is this milestone, or for that matter, task, going to be billable, yes or no? And once you've made that choice, if it is billable, then you're able to define your rate. So is it, a rate that's billed depending on the cost per hour or the price per hour of the staff member who's doing the work? Or is it something that's a defined rate that you say, actually, we're going to charge the same price per hour for this, whether it's a junior, sort of intern, all the way up to, vice president doing the work. And if you choose defined, then you get to choose your rate type. And so here's just some default rates. You can configure the rates in Accelo, always have been able to be whatever you want them to be. In this case, I'm using the consulting rate, but I've actually overridden it. I'm charging $195 instead of $175 an hour. And another key point, I've already set this one up, but this service here, this is the consulting service. And so this is where you're able to go through and be able to edit those guys. So consulting, international, and I can put that in there and have that service item take shape, for example. We've also got the time. So once we've got the rate and then the type of service handle, that's that service type stuff I was telling you about, then we can come into look at the time. We can say, okay, we want to look at the, we can budget either on a calculated time basis, which adds up all of the things underneath this milestone, or in this case, I'm defining the budget for this milestone at 15 hours. And then I can also say, what price do I want? Do I want to calculate the price, which would be 15 times 195? Or do I want to make it something that's a little bit more, so maybe round it up? So I can put an explicit price in there, but this screen will always show you what the calculated price was, so you can make sure you're not undercharging, or if you are rounding down to get it under a threshold number, you're not rounding it down too much. Now, looking down at implementation here, this is another milestone, and this is one that's got the Contico CMS Professional Edition. I'm completely making this up. If you're someone who works with Contico and you're like, hey, there's no such thing as Professional Edition, just please ignore. And so what you're able to do with milestones as well as on the project as a whole is you're able to create these materials rows, and you've been able to do this for a while, but now you're able to use these item lists. And so you can go through and add a new row, and then you can search inside the database. So if I wanted to include a MacBook for these guys, sorry, misspell, I can then see, oh, what are my different MacBooks? Oh, actually, I want to do the top of the line one. Thank you very much here. And then I can provide my extra description, which normally will come out of the material item. I just didn't import a description for the MacBook. If we have a look over here. Yeah, I was a naughty boy and didn't provide that when I imported it. And then you're able to choose your quantity, your unit cost, and your unit price. Now, what's pretty cool about this is under the hood, we're actually storing, even though we're only showing 2 decimal places over here in the cost and price, and you can see there's a few decimals going on with the quantity, we're actually storing, I think it's up to 5 decimal places. A lot of granularity there, which is going to be really popular for the digital agency folks that are out there selling, maybe it's a high quantity of low price per unit, like, cost per clicks, or maybe it's a low quantity of, a very small quantity of very highly valuable things. Either way, you can have a lot more granularity around pricing than you could before. Okay, so I'm going to save this in here now. So now we're selling them both Contico and also a MacBook. Nice business there. And so I'm going to save and exit out of this. And it just, with those couple of little changes of being able to choose my lists, we're able to see that stuff take effect. We're able to see our material list here. We're able to add materials after the project has been started, if we like, by getting linked back across the project plan. And we can also see from this box if this material has actually already been invoiced. Okay, so we've got ourselves the new materials, and now we're into project plan land. Let's duck back to the presentation before we jump into the next area. So as I mentioned, you create these milestones and you're able to link them across, or tasks or materials, you're able to link them across to the types here. So consulting, technical, license, and training, they're all the item types, whether they be services or materials. And then on the left here is our classic kind of project plan with milestones and indentations, and you can link those up. Now, there's nothing stopping you from, the last thing we want to do is say, oh, well, if the service isn't in the price list, then you can't, or you have to have the title match exactly. So you can have consulting, which includes both requirements, and development potentially, or discovery workshop. You can have a bunch of things that are born from or are linked from the consulting service item. And that sort of thing is great because you can customize it to match what the customer is expecting to buy for that particular project or that particular milestone. Now, these links to these service items are optional, but they are recommended. And the reason they're recommended is it'll make it easier for reporting later, and it'll also make the billing process a lot smoother because the people who are doing the billing won't have to go through and choose one of these types at the time or choose a ledger or account code to make the invoice work with your accounting system. All right. So we've now got our service items and we've covered how we use them and how they connect with our accounting stuff. Now let's look at some of the next area, which is our invoice templates. Now these are super powerful. One of the things that folks were asking for a long time from Accelo is the ability to have a lot more flexibility with how their invoices look, with the level of detail they provide on them. And they also really wanted to make sure that they were, happening through a PDF format instead of being stuck inside email land. So that's what we've done here with the templates model. So we'll actually come back to the screen and play with it in a minute, but I just want to set the context before we do, that the objective here is to set up a template so that you can go through and create an invoice in a pretty effortless, quick way. There is a little bit of setup once off for these templates. We've actually preloaded into all of your accounts. I think it's about half a dozen fairly generic ones to capture things like, retainer billing or last month's approved work or last month's all work or remaining budget. So we've got a bunch of them in there to start with. But the idea is you can clone those and customize them. You can create your own and clone the ones that you create. The objective is to give you, and most importantly, your team members, the ability to just choose from a drop-down list and create an invoice without having to think too much and minimizing the chances of errors and mistakes, because there's few things sort of embarrassing as sending somebody an incorrect bill. So the way that this invoice templating area works, the screen layout if you like, is the top section of the screen you first come into is all about the rules and calculations. And then the bottom section of the screen you first come into when you're editing a template is customizing the communications. Basically, what do you want to say in the email you send out? There's a button down at the bottom right, though, that opens up a pop-up that uses the rules and calculations information in particular to then allow you to customize and modify what you show in the actual PDF that's produced. And that's where you can customize your logo and you can customize the text you have, and you can also choose the layout from how much detail to provide. So it's really the different parts: rules and calcs, communications, and then the layout and the details. So let's go through them together. So here we've got in this top part, not just the top card here that's sort of like, a bit skinny, but all the way down really to the start of this email, subject and body. This is all about the calculations and the rules. So the first thing you do is you give your template a title. You can choose who should be a default owner. You can toggle on and off the custom fields to display so that you present that information, or you can hide it away from users by default when they go to create an invoice. And then we have preferences that get set up based on the object you're invoicing. So if you're billing for a project, for example, you're in create project or create invoice off a project, and you choose this particular type of invoice, this particular type of template here, what you'll get is a series of things like, line item settings. Okay, I want to bill for work done. Or maybe I want to bill for a percentage of budget. How much? Oh, I want to bill for 50% of budget. I want to get us to the halfway mark. Or I can bill for remaining budget. How much is still outstanding, for example. We can also have invoice detail in here. So that's where we choose whether we want to roll up and just show one line item for the project, or we want to show each milestone potentially as a line item if there was work done there, or even the level of detail of milestones and tasks if there was work done on those. We can see the work status. So that's, do we want to only show approved stuff when we're using our calculations, or include everything? And we can also have preferences such as whether it was just work logged before the 1st of the month. So that will include all the work up until 11:59 and 59 seconds on the day at the end of the last month. So before midnight at the first day of this month. We can do before today, or we can do all work that hasn't been billed yet. And of course, we've got our service items here, which is a fallback position for us to use in case we need to, they haven't chosen a service item when they were doing things like their project budgeting, project planning, or their quoting. The itemization will actually cover separately, but basically it allows you to take, even at its most detailed stuff like milestones and tasks, you can actually break it down even further and have an individual line item for every staff member or for every rate. So if you've got like a senior engineer rate and a junior engineer rate, you could group it that way and have the different rates appear as line items in what you're actually invoicing to the customer. And then lastly, you've got the section about work detail. And your work detail is where we can allow you to provide your customer a table of all of the work you've done in the PDF that we create, which is really fantastic and allows you, if you want, to provide a bunch more information to them. Ticketing is very similar. It's actually a bit simpler because there aren't milestones in ticketing. And retainers are similar. That we're actually still doing a bit of work over here on the right-hand side with the retainers area, making sure that we've got toggles for whether you want to include the work detail from, say, the previous period or not, and kind of what levels of detail you want to have there. But because we're dealing with things that are kind of more of an ongoing basis, and often with prepaid, charge $1,000 or $2,000 for next month's work, there's a few differences there, and that's all in the templates. Rolling down through the last of the calculations and rules, we've got things like materials and expenses where you can choose whether to include them or not, what you want the defaults to be. You can also say whether or not you want to include, if you choose a percentage of budget. So when I did work done up here, which is the default, that's where you're saying, hey, I want to bill for all the work that I've done. But if you want to say a percentage of budget, then you're not actually adding up all of the hours or the activities. You're just declaring that your bill is going to be $X. So you can choose from a work detail point of view, if you do want to include it, what level of detail do you want to have on the customer's invoice? Do you want to include all of the work? So effectively you can say, hey, here's a remaining budget we're billing you for. And by the way, here's all the stuff that we did, or just last month or last week, or, basically various options there. And of course the choice between approved, all, or even just the uninvoiced stuff, the stuff you've never sent them a bill for, which is great for that end of project budget where you're like, hey, here's the total amount. And by the way, here's all the activities we haven't sent to you yet as part of our invoicing and our work. Down in the bottom section, we've got a whole bunch of stuff around the subject and body. So we've got the details of, this is how the email will be delivered to the customer. There's heaps of merge fields here. If you click on one, it'll copy it to your clipboard and then you can come across and paste it. Inside this email you send to the customer, you can include your logo, embedding images, for example. You can get in and mess with the HTML directly if that's your kind of thing. You can have links, bullets, bolds, headings, all that sort of stuff. It's not obviously the full land of desktop publishing, but then again, it's going to show up in someone's inbox as an email. So, you kind of don't want it to look too crazy, or maybe they'll think it's not something serious like an invoice, and maybe just hit delete thinking it's a special deal from their retailer mailing list. Okay, so that's covering two of the parts of how we configure templates. The last one is the actual configuration of the PDF, or the layout, as I tend to call it. So the first thing you can do is make a few changes with styles. We've got a couple of choices here. We want to add more of those, but we wanted to get this out the door and in your hands first. But then you can actually, regardless of what we have as the style guides here, which are just sort of high level choices, you can actually go through and have a heck of a lot of control on what actually gets output of what the user gets to see on the on the PDF that we generate for your invoice. So you can see all that information there. And if you're like, oh, hang on a minute, what's this merge field? Or you're looking at a blank slate and you're like, I wish I had the field for X. You can actually toggle up here, find those fields, click again to copy on the clipboard and bring them across. So really handy in that respect. So there's some of these sections, there's like a top right and top left, because often this stuff comes out looking like a letter, if you like, or something with the letter head. So you've got your top section. Then we've got a full width body, if you like, here for lots of information. Then we've got a series of tables, and I'll take you through what they mean in a minute. And then there's some more stuff down the bottom here in terms of custom fields that you can have your terms of service or any of the other details you want to provide. Now, as I mentioned, there's these section of the invoice items here, and we've got services, materials, and expenses. And so we can actually configure with turn on, turn off functionality, which columns we want to show with these guys. So, for example, and I will say we do need to provide at least the table if indeed there is services and expenses. Otherwise, we're telling the customer that they owe, X $100 or whatever the number is without any rows whatsoever. So there is a need to provide some detail here to make it a valid invoice, but we can certainly dial it right back. So this is pretty fully loaded right now, but what I can do is go through and say, you know what, we're not going to include pretty much anything other than we did some stuff and here's the amount. And remember, if you remember a couple of minutes ago, I was saying that you can choose the level of roll up or detail, whether it's milestones and tasks or just the project. So if you wanted to build for just the project, that would just be the services row here for just the project. We then also have the materials guy. So you can say again, oh, hang on a minute. Maybe I want to take out the tax information, but I can show the quantity and then the total. So you can do that. The expenses, similarly, you can choose what you want to show there in terms of detail. And then the next area I want to show actually is this work detail stuff. It's really, really powerful. So with work detail here, what you're able to do is, for the first time, choose to provide the details of the activities or the work that's been done in the actual invoice. So, some of you as users are going to think, no, God, no, we don't want to do that. We just want to have like the table that says you owe us this amount of money and a nice letterhead, and it's going to be awesome that we can do the PDF file, and that's all we need. However, for other folks, there's going to be a desire to actually provide a bunch of substantiating information. So if you're going into a customer saying, hey, you need to pay us 10 grand, and that's just all you have as a total, there might be situations where you get a bit of pushback, understandably. And so this allows those of you who want to provide that detail, the scenario where, you could produce a 10, 20, 30 page long PDF. The first page, or maybe it's a couple of pages, depending on how many service items you've got and materials and expenses rows. But, you'd have that first section with just the high level details so that the accounts payable team can know how much to send you. But you can also then have all of this extra detail here, including, for example, putting in crazy stuff like including the actual body of the activity, which if this is an email, that could be quite a lot of content. So, you can really choose which way you want to go with this stuff. And you can also dial it back a bit. So here, I might not want to show the date, but I want to say that some work got done, and I might want to say who did it and what the hours are. We're actually going to be simplifying this so that we're just using the person's first name and then their last initial, just to, sort of not show too much of what's going on behind the curtains. But yeah, you can basically turn on and off whatever you like in terms of these columns here. You can even include rates per hour and number of hours. And with this table here at the moment, it's just sort of shown chronologically, if you like. But what you can also do is you can group it by the rate per hour. So if there was someone who was like on a junior rate and someone who's on a most senior rate and then someone who's the most senior rate, it'll actually have multiple tables with the separation there. Or you can choose to group it by staff member. So you can say, okay, here's all of Eamon's stuff, and then here's all of Joe's stuff, and you can have a nice table of that. And, pretty obviously, as you look at this, you think, hey, if I'm showing staff, I don't need to include the owner column here, so I can drop that out and have a bit more space. So that's all available for you there. So that's how you're able to customize and configure the way that your templates work. I appreciate there's a lot of options there, and there's a bunch of moving parts, but the promise is, once you've got this right, and you can continually iterate on it and create as many of these as you like, including the ability to clone them. So if there's one that you really, really like, you can just hit clone and duplicate that bad boy and start from there, tweaking again. The actual process of invoicing on a daily or weekly basis or monthly basis becomes very much a breeze. All right. So now let's talk about creating actual invoices themselves. So we bring this all together now where you're able to say, all right, I'm on a project, or I'm on a ticket, or I'm on a retainer, and I'm going to go through and create an invoice for the work that I've done there, or a percentage of the budget, or the remaining budget, for example. Where we're at right now is, we've had this out for a couple of days. There were a couple of kinks and twists with the retainer invoicing. We're still finalizing a couple of little twists there, but that should be, all fixed up. And we're really, sort of first of the month is a key billing period. So we still got sort of a week to go there, and we're optimizing to get everything all buttoned down over the next couple of days. So if you're having like, oh, I tried to create a retainer invoice and it was a little bit slow or a little bit frustrating, or I ended up with too many rows, just bear with us another couple of days. We're moving really quickly. But let's actually have a look at what we've got and how it fits together. So the create invoice screen basically has, 4 different sections to it. The first one is the overall invoice details. The second part is the services items. So that's what you're actually billing for as services. The next one is material items. So that's the materials you're billing for. And then the last one is expenses that haven't been billed yet. Those guys all come together. You can use checkboxes, turn them on and off, whatever you want to do. And so you can put that information, you can choose what the invoice has. You're able to customize your ledger and account and tax codes if you want to there. And then once you're ready, you can then customize the layout details of the PDF. So you're actually able to then, even though you've chosen a template and all your layout details have come from the template and all of the calculations have come from the template, you can override them on a per invoice basis if you want to. So let's say normally you'd want to provide the details of the number of hours in your activity report, but this particular customer you're sending the bill to is a real pedant and they're going to go through with a calculator and a little green brimmed hat and add them all up and work out that there's 15 minutes of billable time it wasn't accounted for in the listing and they want a refund for 15 minutes or something like that. You could choose to dial that information back. Now, what happens is once you hit create on the invoice, one of two things happens. If you're connected to your accounting system like Xero, QuickBooks, Sasu, what will happen is we'll push the invoice across to go into your accounting system. And for the QuickBooks desktop folks, you need to have your accounting system sort of online and doing its polling business because QuickBooks desktop is installed behind the firewall. And so we need the QuickBooks web connector that you use to be the thing that's checking with Accelo every 5 minutes to see if there's a new invoice to pull down since we can't push it behind your firewall. Once the invoice comes into your accounting system, which for the cloud-based guys, which hopefully increasingly will be all of you, and not using so much of the desktop type stuff with all of its 1990s amazingness. For the cloud-based guys, this will sync usually within a couple of minutes. And what happens is we'll push it across to your accounting system. And the reason we do that first, before we create the PDF, is we actually want to get the invoice ID from your accounting system. We want your accounting system to be the source of truth. Because if the customer's writing on a check to say, hey, I'm paying invoice 1234 and they post it to you, or do some sort of EFT and put it in the notes area, the team that are doing the reconciliation of those payments are going to be using your accounting software. And so we don't want to have two sets of invoice IDs. We don't want to have like this Accelo invoice ID, which is completely different to the QuickBooks ID. That'd be, or Xero ID. So what happens is we push it to your accounting system and then we wait for your accounting system to give us back the ID. And then we publish the PDF. And once we've got the ID and we've published the PDF, then we email it to the client. Now, if you're not connected to an accounting system in Accelo and you, pardon me, choose to publish the PDF or create and send, we'll create the PDF and then we'll send it to the client, and that's how that works. One question that came up earlier on today in another session we had was, can you publish or create these invoices without sending to the customer? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. You do not have to email them out to the client. They actually get created as attachments or resources inside of Accelo against whichever object the invoice was created for. So there's nothing stopping you from going through and using all of the power of the activity setting system to go through and create a special email that maybe pulls together 6 or 7 different invoices for one customer if you wish to do that piece manually. So let's actually go through and create one together. I'm going to go through and look at my recently viewed list of projects here. And so this is the one that I want to play with, the example project. And so what I'm able to do is come in and create an invoice off this. So I come in and hit create, choose invoice. And so the first thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to choose a template. So I come in here and these are all the templates that we were talking about and setting up before. So let's say I want to invoice these guys for a deposit. So I can send a deposit invoice. What it'll do is it'll automatically choose the title of what I had. It'll choose the owner and who we're sending the bill to, the dates of the invoice, the notes and description, both internal and customer facing, the classic thanks for your business, or we can't start this project until you've paid the deposit, whatever works there for you. And then all of the service items come through with the math or the mathematics applied, the rules applied based on the template. So in this case, we're showing a percentage of budget is 25% is what we're going to bill. So you can put that information in there. Let's say let's say you were kicking off a project for a customer and you thought that maybe they're a little bit sketchy. You thought, hey, they might not be around in 3 months. I don't want to take the risk. Let's increase the percentage and go to 50% instead of 25. Or let's say it's a customer that you've negotiated in the sales process for a 10% deposit instead of the usual 25. So you can change those details right here. You can also choose a level of detail, as I mentioned. So you can have one, sort of entry for the entire project, or you can break it down into milestones, which I'd mentioned before, or you can have milestones and tasks as well. So whichever way you want to go with that stuff. If you choose to invoice for the work that's been done, you're then able to go through, and we actually haven't got any work done, so I shouldn't have done this demo. But if you had, 10 hours or 20 hours here, you could choose to itemize that based on who did the work, or you could choose to itemize it based on the rate, which would then end up with more rows, more line items in the report, in the view. When it comes to creating the invoice, the question is like, okay, what do you want to do with all the activities that are there? Do you want to, mark them all as invoiced, kind of like sweep them all off the table and say, right, we're done now? Or do you want to mark only the approved ones as invoiced? Or do you not want to touch any of them at all? This is just a deposit. We might have logged some hours that were about, sort of getting established, but let's not, have any changes made to those hours in terms of marking them as billed. This is a deposit. We always want to be ahead of the curve. So let's not bill any of them or mark any of them as invoice, for example. And if you wanted to, you could also include only some of the hours. So things that were logged before a certain date, for example. So that tends to be, the log before tends to be more valuable when you're doing based on work done, for example. This option here about include in PDF is the preference about whether or not you want to include the work or activity detail. That was that table which had, the staff members' names and the activity that they did. And if you choose to turn that on, you'll get the defaults coming from the template here, turning things on and off. And as mentioned, you can override those if you want to. And you can also choose what you want to group by. That also comes in from the default sections, as well as choosing what kinds of activities you want to have, whether it's every activity ever, or only the approved ones, or everything that you haven't yet sent them an invoice for that's been created since the last time you sent them an invoice. So that's how you do that. With each row, you can see on the right-hand side here what the service code is. You can see what the ledger and tax code information is. You can change that. So, oh, hang on, this is an export one. Let me change that so it's no tax, etc. You can also see what you've previously invoiced for that milestone or for that task. So you've got lots of detail there, which is pretty awesome. And you can, just see really where you're at with confidence on this particular project. And here we can see that we've got the MacBook that we haven't invoiced for yet, so we want to bill them for that. That's for the charge out price there, and there's no expenses yet to invoice on this particular test project we've got here. So let's say, all right, we're happy with that. We've got the right numbers in place. We feel good about this. Let's just check what we're actually going to send these guys, what it's going to look like. So we can see, hey, we've got some requirements analysis, creative, implementation training. We're showing them the tax amounts, but it's 0. You think, oh, actually, that doesn't seem right. Let's turn off tax and tax amount. We're just telling them a total. And let's do the same thing down here in materials land. Let's turn that business off. You'll notice there's no expenses section because we don't have any expenses. So we don't, bombard the user with options that don't make any sense. And we've also chosen, in this case, not to have any of the work details as part of what we've done. So now we can save and send that as a PDF, and that will crunch away. It tells us, hey, we're building this now, and it's going to be emailed to this person. If we just did save invoice, it wouldn't be sending the PDF out. We'd still create the PDF though. And so this is now looking at the invoice itself. We can see what's here, and I'll give it a minute or two to build this. But what's going to be cool is once this gets built, there it is. It wasn't there before, it is now. We've got the company invoice. So we've actually got the PDF file, the actual PDF file that we can come into and see what we've got and how it looks when we send it out to that customer. So that's pretty sweet. All right, so that's creating an invoice. Now, as mentioned, we've got the same thing going on with tickets or tickets or issues, depending on what you call them. And then the retainers stuff is actually more powerful. And we've made a couple of big changes with retainers, which is what, or some people call them contracts. And the reason that we're still working on a few loose ends here and things aren't quite perfect the way we want them to be, but will be in the next couple of days, certainly in time for the end of month billing, is we have made it so that instead of with the old invoicing system, you actually had to create invoices individually off every contract period. So it's like, one at a time, a bit of drudgery. If you had excess, you were creating a separate invoice for that. So the scenario where potentially you had excess from last month and you had a new prepaid amount to invoice for next month, those would have had to have been 2 invoices, which is pretty kind of crappy. So we've actually made the change now so that when you create new invoices, you can create them still off an individual period, but more commonly, you create them off the retainer. And that change is a pretty big change. Making sure it's backwards compatible and happy is non-trivial. So there's a bunch of work going on there. Still finalizing a few rough edges. Apologies for anyone who's in a bit of a point of frustration these last couple of days, but we're really close. So the idea is now we can see a list of the services that we've got so as individual periods. If there was any excess for the period, we'd show it here, but there isn't any, so that's grayed out for you. We can choose the level of work detail to provide. You can preview that in the PDF. So you can see, okay, there's no work actually. This one is just dummy content. And then you can create that invoice and send it on out the door. So that's how the stuff works for retainers. All right, home stretch, almost there. This is the last slide before Q&A. So this is how we do client invoicing in bulk. So one of the frustrations users had expressed in the past is, hey, I'm doing like 4 projects at once for these a high value client. I've also got 20 like little tickets that I've got, which were ad hoc things that aren't part of a support agreement. And I also have a bunch, let's say a retainer we have for priority support or after hour support, which needs to cover things. Now, in the past, you would have to create an individual invoice for each one of those 4 projects that was underway. And you'd have to go through and create an invoice for the tickets, and you'd have to go and create individual invoices for each contract and even potentially contract periods. So there might be an invoice for the overdue, for the excess, and an invoice for next month's bill. Basically there's just too many invoices, too much work, and the process of doing it is a pain too, because you have to know what you need to bill before you can actually go and bill it, which is a little bit chicken and the egg. So with the new upgrade, we've introduced the concept of bulk invoicing. That's what we call it internally. It's actually called client invoicing. I shouldn't have slipped the tongue like that. But basically, it's the ability for you to go through and invoice all of your different clients, or at least lots of different clients, for lots of different work, all in one wizard. And it stacks together the services, materials, and expenses all into invoices that are targeted 1 per customer or 1 per contact at a customer. So the first one we've got here, the steps that we've got are, first of all, you search and filter. Then you choose who and what to invoice for. Then you customize and consolidate and edit the invoice per contact or per client. And then you hit go, and we will build the invoice, create it, and either send it or just leave it there for you to come and get later at your discretion. And then once it's finished, you're able to you're then able to go through and you see the next customer, and you do this over and over and over again for each client. So let's go and have a look at it in action. It's under the reports heading here. We can go into company billing. If you call companies clients, it'll rename that for you. And so the first thing to do is find the clients or companies that we want to actually invoice for. So you're able to go through and choose your different statuses here, a whole bunch of built-in ones, and then that'll be relevant for your account. And then you can choose the objects you want to bill for. So we say, okay, projects, I want to bill for those. So you can choose the statuses of projects and the types of projects you want to bill for. Limit it to be just the ones that you or your colleagues are managers of. So you can just start typing in someone's name there and find those. And then you can choose what work you want Accelo to hunt for to surface. So you say, all right, I want to find anything that's got time on it, and I actually want to get all of the activities. And I want to find anything that's still got a budget remaining that hasn't been billed for yet, and any materials and expenses that haven't been billed for yet. And for expenses, I do want to limit myself just to approved ones in case someone's accidentally put an expense that there's no way we can pass that on to the customer. So I'm just going to loosen a few of these up. Retainers, as I mentioned, they're a bit quirky, they're a bit different. So, do you want to find prepaid amounts that haven't been billed yet? And do you want to, go and get the ones that are only created after a certain date? Do you want to go and get excess? Do you want anyone who are doing postpaid, where you set up a retainer, which might give them a special price per hour, and then you just bill them for the hours that you've done? So all of that stuff is able to come through in your filters here. You can choose if you want to do time logged things like excess or post-paid amounts. Do you want to get all activities or just the approved ones? And expenses, similarly, do you want to limit it to just be some? So we hit apply, and that was how quick it loads. Like this is on production kit, lots of data in here. We've got all these different companies that it's found. So yeah, pretty impressive stuff. Now in this case, I'm just going to invoice, for example, company because we're short on time. But what it's telling me is that we've got one project, one ticket, and 32 retainer periods that we could bill for this example company that fit the criteria that we set out on the left-hand side here as we went through and chose all of our things. Now, in this case, I'm actually going to take, say, the retainer periods out. So I mark them as red. They get a little dash through them, a line through them here. And so I can basically say, look, I'm only going to bill for projects and tickets for this customer, which could be really ideal if you've got, for example, a whole bunch of tickets that are maybe like nickel and diming type things, but you want to go through and bill for major project and retainer work. So you can just choose on a client by client basis what to show or hide. So we'll come through to the next screen. And then what we do is we can see a list of the projects. So if we have more than one, you'd see them listed down here. More than one issue, you'd see them listed down here. You can say what we're doing in terms of the amount that we're doing billing for. You can turn them on and off. In this case, I'm using some test data, so there's a lot of zeros in here, but that'll fill out with the actual information. And of course, you can go through and choose for what you want to do. So work done all means it'll go and fetch any of the hours that we've got in there that haven't been billed for yet, and fetch those. And then you can also choose what you want to include in terms of the work detail. You can have those settings again for the rates and the hours and the owners and stuff. And then you can create and email or just create. And that will build the PDF and send you along to your next customer. Now, if you've got a whole bunch of these, you'll actually see the progress down here and the flood bar fill up. And if you want to switch quickly across to another company who's maybe not the next one ordered alphabetically, you can choose here and then you'll see a list of them. At the moment, we've just got the one for the purpose of this demo. But we can go through and create that. And that will then create an invoice that goes out to Donnie here at the client account for these two different projects. Sorry, one for a project and one for a ticket. And if I wanted to come in and say, actually, I just want to invoice for a percentage of budget, which is 50%, and here's my detail, I can then go through and provide that information on a sort of project by project basis too. So I can kind of override the defaults. The templates and the defaults exist to get you started, but they don't, really, they're not about putting you in prison. All right, well, that's about it for the session today. But we've got lots of questions to get through. But that's it for the prepared remarks. Other than to say, thanks so much for bearing with us over the last few days. This kind of an upgrade is a really difficult one to make happen because there's a lot of historical information in everyone's accounts, and pretty much every one of our customers is a little bit different. So, going in and having to set up the right items and services types, being able to set up the right information for templates and making some guesses, nothing you guess is ever going to be spot on. And as mentioned, there's those couple of quirks, whether they be, edge cases or a couple of things that we got close, but just, we needed to get out in front of people and sort of fix up during the first part of this week. We appreciate there's a few channels there. So yeah, thanks so much again for everyone for your time. If you've got any questions at all during this process, feel free to email support@accelo.com and send them on through. The team are working really, really hard on the bugs that we have and the couple of gaps or deficiencies, particularly things like the retainer billing and some of the stuff around bulk that we need to handle all the different scenarios for. So, thanks again for your patience. We're committed to having everything really hot and ready to go for the end of month billing. And really, it's super exciting to be bringing this to life after spending large chunks of 2016 working on it as a team. So thanks again. Any questions, send them through to support@Accelo, and we wish you the best of luck and hope you love the power that comes with the new invoicing module. Thanks a lot. Bye.